Hello and welcome to another tutorial. My name is Malik and this tutorial is going to be on Photoshop. I realize there's a lot of people out there who don't understand how Photoshop works and some people are afraid to get into it. These tutorials are actually for people who kind of, opened up Photoshop. They're not experts. They're not even really beginners because they're more afraid of it than anything. The tutorials will later on go into more advanced subjects. But for right now, we're going to start very simply to give people an idea of how this stuff works. When you first open up Photoshop, there won't be anything here. I pulled this picture of this cat off of Google because this is going to be our subject for today. You have your file system up here. When you first open up Photoshop, this all will be blank. This won't even be here. It'll be let's go from the beginning. I'm going to go ahead and close that. I'm not going to save this. I got that from Google anyway. This is the view that you're going to have. You'll have your toolbar here on the side, and you have all your files and stuff up here. And to the right here, one of the most important things of Photoshop is your layers. And a lot of times it will look something like this. If I go to the default, uh, yeah, let's do default. If I go to the default view, this is pretty much how it's going to look. I'm going to have my layers out here, this layers panel. And then I'm going to have all these other panels here that I can go ahead and select. It'll open up, and then if I wanted to close it, I'll just push the double arrow over there. In the layers palette, uh, you can start a new file and make masks and stuff like that. But the reason why none of this is accessible because I haven't really started a project yet. There's a couple of ways I can start a project in Photoshop. I can go to File and go New, and I would name it whatever, and I can go ahead and do some of these custom preset. I mean, some of these custom preset sounds crazy. I can do some of these preset sizes, or I can go ahead and customize it by leaving it at custom and placing the information in here. If I hit OK, it'll go ahead and open that up, and I have my canvas here. Uh, and then you'll notice here on the right hand side in the layers, now I have you can call that maybe a blank sheet, and it's locked, which means I really can't do anything on here. I can't draw or anything. So I either have to do one of two things. I have to unlock this, or I have to go ahead and create a new layer. And it creates an empty layer on top of that. This is important because a lot of times when beginners are messing around with Photoshop, they forget that you have to have the layer selected. Whatever layer you have selected is the layer you're going to be painting on. We're going to get a little bit deeper into that later. But for right now, just understand that these layers are important in Photoshop. This is what makes Photoshop so great. On the other hand, if I didn't want to make a new layer and I wanted to use the layer that I started with, I can double click this. The thing to also remember about Photoshop is this thing right here, this layer, depending on where I click it, I'm actually activating a different part of the layer. So if I click here, I click on the new layer and I can change the name of the layer. Right? I can change the name to whatever I want. When I changed the name, it unlocked it automatically because it's assuming that I want to go ahead and adjust it. There's another way to unlock it. It's just by double clicking the lock and just hitting OK. I don't have to even name the layer. If I were to click here in this area, that opens up a layer style. So I can add styles and effects to this. And this eye right here tells me whether the layer is visible or not. I can turn it off or on. Now, when you have a lot of layers, this is going to be very important. We're going to be getting into grouping and stuff like that later, but just to keep in mind that everything that you add into Photoshop will be organized by layers and groups. For right now, let's go. I'm going to go to Google. And the first tutorial we're going to do today is basically going to be on the fundamentals of selecting, because that's actually a huge part of Photoshop. So I went to Google and I pulled up some of these tires, and let's get one that's at an angle so it could be a little bit tougher. So let's just grab this. I'm going to select that, And with Photoshop, I don't have to necessarily save it. Photoshop saves all the information into one Photoshop file. So I'm just going to grab that and drag it onto the blank canvas. Now, these tools here is all I really need when it comes down to manipulating an image on a very basic level. The first thing I want to be able to do is make sure I'm on the right layer, and whenever you're in a production setting, you always want to name your layers, especially when you have a lot of layers. This is going to be very important. Remember to name your layers. Now, as I'm moving forward, I might forget to do that only because it's a simple tutorial and I really am trying to get the concepts across as far as using these tools and not necessarily a pipeline. But get used to naming these layers. And I don't need this bottom layer. That's just white. I can go ahead and delete that by selecting the layer and then clicking this delete button. Now, if you notice, I'm not right now I'm in the text tool, and you can tell because the text tool is pressed. See how it's indented? So what I want to do is I want to go to this move tool, click that. I'm already in the right layer because I only have one layer. I click this and I can move it over. Another tool you will be using fairly frequently will be the translate tool. So now that I have it selected, and I'm not going to keep going back and forth here to this toolbox because this is not really the best way to operate when it comes to Photoshop or any high-end program. Basically, you want to learn the shortcut keys to everything. So what we're going to be doing from now on is mostly using the shortcut keys, and I really want you guys to remember all the shortcut keys. And if you want to become pro at anything, you have to know all the shortcut keys to the program. That's 3D, that's Photoshop, After Effects, all of those things. It makes your productivity a lot faster. So I'm going to hit Control T. That's going to be my translate tool. And the translate tool, if I just leave it that way and I start translating it, you notice I can translate it in any direction. I can just completely screw up the aspect ratio. But that's not really what I want. I'm going to hit exit and bring it back to where the way it was. So I exited out of that tool and I'm going to hit translate tool again, and I'm going to hold down shift. Now you notice I can't just translate it any sort of way. It's going to maintain its shape. It's just getting bigger. So this is a good size. I'm going to hit enter. Now this is a very important point here. There's two enters in Photoshop. There's the enter that's next to the regular keys. Then there's the enter that's next to the number pad that's on the number pad, and that's the enter that finalizes the tools in Photoshop. So I hit enter on the number pad, and then I'm gonna hit the select tool here again, and the select tool shortcut key is V, and I'm gonna center that. Now there's different kinds of selects. There is the lasso. If I click the select tool here, and if you hold the mouse over the tool, it'll show you the shortcut key. There's 4 different select tools here. These are like preset shapes. So I have the square shape, rectangle, sorry, the elliptical, single row, and single column. So for different reasons, you might want to be able to use these, these selection tools for other projects. But for right now, we want something that's more geared towards the shape of this tire. So I actually think the elliptical marquee tool would be the best choice. There's a couple of ways I can do this. I can try to match it up here fairly easily. Once I have it matched up somewhat, if you notice, I matched it up, then I moved it. Well, I didn't match it, but I left it and then I moved it. This is not what you want to do because you can see, because I had the move tool selected, it's moving the actual image. It's cutting into the image. So I don't really want to do that. There's a couple of other ways we can go about this. We can use the lasso tool. And with the lasso tool is also a selection tool that allows me to go ahead and just draw the shape. This is not necessarily going to be the best way to do this because, as you can see, it's all messed up there. There's the Polygonal Lasso. This is where you select it, and this is really good for like buildings and stuff like that, but not necessarily for tires. And then I can close it off by clicking next to my starting point. There's a magnetic lasso. What it does is it connects to pixels that are similar. So I don't have to keep clicking. I just kind of drag my mouse near the edge, and it snaps to the edge on its own. So this is a little bit more feasible than the previous. And when I get to the edge, it creates a little circle there, and I just click that circle, and then it finalizes it. That's actually pretty close. So we can probably keep that if you wanted to, but let's move on. There's the this magic wand. The magic wand is interesting because you can adjust this thing to do all sorts of things, but when you have so many different colors here, it's not going to be that great of a tool to use. So if I were using the magic wand to select the center part, what I would actually do first is I would select the outer portion. And when you're using the magic wand, you see all this, it's selecting a lot of different things that I just don't want. And that's going to, excuse me, that's going to come down to the tolerance. And if I go up here and I look at the tolerance, it's at 10. I can set that a little bit higher so it can select the same pixels. Let me see. So you would fool around with this tolerance just to, I want you guys to just fool around with it to get a good sense of how this thing works. Let's say if I went all the way up to 100 and I click that. You notice it's not really clicking a whole bunch. So it's really just mixing in all the colors together. As I go down, let's say if I go to 50 and I click it, it's actually accepting a lot more colors that's similar. So the lasso tool is a good tool to use when you're selecting a lot of the same colors. But when it comes to something like this where it's mostly a shape, it's not really that good of a deal to use because of the gradation, and it's going to take a lot longer to get a solid selection. So our original idea was right to be able to go to this. So there's one more kind of selection I actually wanted to go over, and that's more of the masking selection tool. Uh, it's not really, well, it's kind of a tool because it actually merges the tool with the masking function. So what I want to do is I want to go to my side toolbar, and I'm going to click the brush, or you can click B. Now when you click the brush, it's going to be a particular size. Now you can change the size of this brush a couple of ways. The easiest way would be through the shortcut. If you don't want to use the shortcut keys, you can actually go and change the size through the brush presets or the so if I change the size here, you notice I'm changing the size, and I can actually change the type of brush by using some of the presets. I can change some of the attributes here, and this will be a little bit more advanced tutorial later on. I can go ahead and select from some brushes that I actually made or that comes with that's already there with Photoshop. So there's a couple of ways you can do that. The best way to do it, though, the easiest way, is to right mouse button, click, and then you can change the size. I just wanted you guys to know where that comes from. The hardness is how, if there's going to be any feathering to the brush, and because we're selecting a hard edge, we really just want that 100%. And we can look at the size here. See, the more I change that, the size changes. And because I'm going to be selecting actually a large area here, so I kind of want that pretty big when I'm dealing with masking. So I just go ahead and click anywhere on the screen. I can see how big that is because I'm on the brush and I can see how big it is. So I'm going to hit Control Z, delete that. And now I want to start selecting this with the masking tool. And if I go here to the bottom, I can go ahead and see that the masking tool is there. And it gives me the shortcut key. It's Q. So I go ahead and click that. And it doesn't seem like anything has changed, but if you notice, look, the layer here changed colors. You see? So when I click this, the layer kind of changed colors. And if you notice, when I start clicking, it's red. That's just telling me the area that I'm selecting. So this is actually another way to select this center part. But really, what I'm doing is the part that's red won't be selected. It'll select everything else outside of that. So I'm going to need this to be a little bit smaller. So I go ahead and right mouse button and make that a little bit smaller so I can start painting on the inside here. So this is another way to just select an area. I can get pretty precise with this, but remember, this is just to give you an idea of how many ways you can select. Selecting is a huge part of Photoshop. I'm not going to be accurate here just for the sake of time. You can take your time. And again, I can use the Wacom, or right now I'm basically just using my mouse. So after I have that done, I can hit Q again, and if you notice, it did select everything on the outside. If I hit delete, it was everything except for the center part. You see? I'm going to undo that. So remember, when you're using that masking tool, it's actually you're masking the part you do not want cut out. And we can actually change this around. This is actually a good time to go over the inversion of the selection tool. So right now, if you notice, I hit delete, and it deletes everything except for the part that had the red in there. I'm going to Control Z that. Now I want to invert that, so it's actually going to just delete the middle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Control, Shift, and I. That inverts the selection. So now when I hit delete, it'll only delete what was in the center. I'm going to hit Control Z again to bring that back because that's not really what I want. And another important tip here is how to deselect. There's a couple of ways you can deselect. I can go back to the Select tool, hit V, and select anywhere outside of here. And you notice there's nothing happening. I'm still in that selection, you see. So the way to deselect won't necessarily be through here. Although I could hit a selection tool and just click it once without making any selection, it will deselect. But when you're in another tool, you don't want to have to do that. So what you want to do is hit Control D. That will deselect it. That's why I really want you guys to really understand how important these shortcut keys are. So our original idea of going to this elliptical marquee tool was actually the best way to go about this whole deal. So I'm going to actually create another layer, so I'm not necessarily fooling around with this layer. I click on that layer, and now I'm going to go ahead and mess around with my selection tool. So I'm going to select this edge. I'm going to go all the way across. I'm going to start going down. And then I'm going to shift select and go across here because we're dealing with an odd shape here. It's not a really the kind of shape that we want. So you notice how that added to the selection. I'm going to do it again. I'm going to select and go down. I have that selection. I'm going to add to this selection by hitting shift and then go outside of that selection. I'm going to hit shift and go outside of that selection again. You notice how it's adding, right? As long as I hit shift and select, it keeps adding. Now I'm going to hit alt. Now watch what happens. It takes away. So just remember shift and add. Now it may seem like we're doing this the hard way. It may seem like it would have been a better idea to just go ahead and start trying to select this thing this way. Well, and then altering the selection, which is possible. But really, I really want you guys to really understand how to select an area, how to add to that selection by holding shift, and how to take away from that selection by holding alt. So I'm going to hit shift again. I'm just going to follow the edge. I'm just holding down shift the whole time. And as you can see, eventually what will happen is I will have the area that I want without actually having to worry about drawing it out. I'm going to have an area that kind of is that's not jagged at all. And I can always add to that in multiple ways. Okay, so we did it this way so you can have a full sense of exactly how to use all the selection tools. So we went over all the selection tools. We went through all of these tools here. Now the way I get to this is I click it and I hold down my left mouse button and then I can get to all these other menus. Whenever you see a dot or an arrow next to a tool, that means there's more inside there, and all you have to do is hold down the left mouse button and then you'll get to those. We went through all of these lasso and polygonal lasso tools. The shortcut keys to that is L. The shortcut keys to these is this one, the marquee tools, is M. We went over the wand, the magic wand tool. Now the truth is we didn't go over both of those. We didn't go over this one. This one's easy. This one actually we could have finished the whole thing a lot easier because really instead of me going to this masking tool right here and masking things out, you know, this way, this tool right here would have allowed me to change the size of my brush, and the way I'm going to do that is with the brackets key on the keyboard. Now the left bracket makes the brush smaller and the right bracket makes it bigger. I could have just done this the whole time instead of, you know, doing what I did before. But the other tools are fairly old. They've been there for a long time, and this tool is fairly new in comparison. So I really didn't want to just jump to that one because the whole concept today is really for you to understand all the other selection tools. So I'm going to hit, let's see if I can go back by hitting Control Z. So I hit Control Z, it looks like it's going back and forth, back and forth. It's not going all the way back to where I started. And the reason is because in Photoshop, in order to go all the way back, to continue going back in history to where you once were, past just one undo, you have to hit Control and Shift and then Z, and it'll continue going back. I'm sorry, Control Alt and Z, and it'll continue going back. So there we go, we're back there. I'm going to hit V to get to my Move tool. And basically, what do I want to do with this? Well, I want to go ahead and Maybe I want to take it out. Maybe I want to add it on another layer. So I have it selected. Or do I have it selected? Right? So if I hit V and I try to move this, I get this error. I'm getting that error because there's really nothing selected because I'm on the wrong layer, as you can see. I have to always remember have that layer selected. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have that layer selected now. Now if I hit V, now I can go ahead and move it out. Okay? So I go ahead and move that out wherever I want. And we go back to the original tool that we use. We go back to the translation tool, and that's Control T, and now I can translate it whichever way I want. Okay? I'm going to hit exit out of that translation tool because I really want you guys to realize something, that even though I separated this thing from the image here, it's still on the same layer. Meaning when I move one, the other one moves. That's not really what I wanted. So I'm going to hold Control, Alt, and Z to go back to where I was. Now I'm going to select this layer, and now when I move it, I hit V. Now when I move it, I'm hit Alt and V. Now watch what happens. I'm actually duplicating it, and when I let that duplication go, it's still on the same layer, but still I have a duplication of it. You see? So there's a lot of different ways you can move this thing around. There's another thing that we can do. Select the layer, hit Control J, and now I have a new layer with the selection. Now, this is how a lot of editing will be done. Because suppose I never really wanted to move this. I just wanted to edit that piece alone. So I go to this layer here, and I can double click that layer right here to get to the styles of the layer. And now from there, I can go ahead and add all sorts of stuff. So let's just say I'm just going to add this coloring here. I'm not going to do anything fancy, just give you guys an idea. Then I hit OK from there. And now, as you can see, it fits in that spot. And I can go ahead and alter that by going to the layer styles here and going through the layer styles here to be able to mesh that or blend it in whichever way that I want. I can always turn the effects off and use the blend that's up here. So there's a lot of different things you can do. As you can see, it changes because it's blending with the layer below. And it doesn't look like I really moved it that much. And as you can see, you can take time. So again, if I wanted to get the outer, the black, there's a couple of ways I can do that when it comes to selection. Now we've gone over all of these, and your first thought may be to use this magic wand, which you can, but if you notice, hold on, let me select the tire. If you notice, when I use the magic wand, it still selects all of this stuff here. So there's a better way to actually do that. If I go to the selection menu here, and I go select color range or select similar layer, now I get a window that allows me to actually add in parts of this by particularly selecting a part of the image. And I can change the range and fuzziness and all this other stuff. This is a much more refined way to select. You see, I can take parts out. I can say, well, I don't want this part selected. I don't like that part. I don't want that part selected. And I can go ahead and keep on doing that till I refine my selection to a point to where I get what I want. So that's how selection works, and that's how Photoshop actually you're able to manipulate a lot of different things. So let's go ahead and go from the beginning, and let's do something like cats. Again, I had that picture up in the beginning. I'm going to go to images, and let's select a cat. Oh man, look at that. Let's do this one here. Gonna pull that over here. I pulled it into an empty spot and it automatically made its own file for me. So it created it as a BMP because that's the original file. It already gave me the layer, obviously, because that's the original picture. And so now what I want to do is I want to unlock this. And remember, there's a couple of ways we could do that. I can just double click this thing here and name that. And once I name it, it's automatically unlocked. We want to go ahead and select the outside, and there's a couple of ways we do that. First, let's try the easiest way, which would be this magic wand, and see how much we can get away with. Well, that's not going to be too good. That doesn't look too good. So let's try the lasso. This is probably the best way we can do this. And I'm not going to get too detailed, but I'm just going to take this as fast as I can. Now there's ways we can get the whiskers and all that other stuff, but this is just to give you guys a quick understanding. Alright, so I have that selected. Now I don't want to delete the cat. I want to delete the background. As a matter of fact, I want to get used to not deleting all the time, so I'm going to create another layer. And I'm going to hit Control J to make a new. Oh, sorry. I want to delete this layer. I didn't mean to make 3 layers. So I'm going to take this layer right here. I'm going to take this layer and drag it to the trash. I want to delete that layer, and now I have it selected. I missed a piece right here, and that's good because now I can quickly use the eraser tool. That's way too big, so I'm gonna make that small. I'm gonna use my shortcut keys, use the left bracket, make it smaller there, erase that. I don't really care about the ear because this is not something important. I want to name my layer. You can name the layers the same name, but that doesn't even make sense if you do that. And that's the selection tool. I want to select the eyes. Let's change the eye color. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the elliptical, just like what we did before. And here's a trick to the selection tool. Instead of me starting on the end, which I can do that. I really want to start in the middle. I'm going to hit Shift and Shift and Alt. So it builds from the middle. I let that go like that. There we go. Now I'm going to hit Shift again and Alt. That will allow me to have both selections. If I hit Shift and then Shift again, it allowed me to keep the same selections. Now from there, I'm going to make sure I have the right layer selected. I'm going to hit Control J. Now I have those eyes by themselves, and I'm doing that so I can add a filter to those eyes, or style. So I double click that, and let's add some sort of outer glow to it. So I click the check mark to make the outer glow, then I click the name itself to get the instructions and stuff to the outer glow. Now, or the settings, sorry. Now I can spread that, and I can make it not so thick, the line. There we go. And now I'm going to make another layer of the eyes, and I'm going to merge that. I'm going to merge the layers together with these style settings. I'm just filtering through, you guys, so you can just filter through and check them out. And this is kind of what I recommend. I recommend you just filtering through to just check out how different things look. Eventually you'll become good enough to know exactly what you're looking for. But I really want you to filter through to know how they look. And if I like how something looks, but I really don't want it so dark, I can go ahead and lower the opacity to it so the effect is not so strong. I can also click this and I can go to filters, and I could go to any of these, it's going to open a palette, or it's going to open a window actually with all the filters and stuff in there. And from here I can select all sorts of filters. I'm just going to select that just for time's sake, and then hit OK. It automatically will add that, as you can see. If I take this off and I raise the opacity, you can see the grid that was placed there. Okay, and that's it. Now that I have the whole background selected and taken out, I can go to add a picture in the background and another layer. And this is why Photoshop is awesome, because of the layers. So I can select this picture once it loads. By the way, my computer was built in 1850. That's why it's taking so long. I can take this picture, drag it over here. And what the H? What happened here? This picture's huge. Well, that's when we come into what we learned at the beginning. Control T. And if you notice, I can't really see the outer layers of this. So I have to go back. I have to zoom out to see the outer borders of this. So I'm going to hit Alt and my middle scroll button. I can go ahead and scroll out that way. And I'm going to hold Shift and drag this to a proper size. And then go ahead and place it. And then I hit the Enter button on the number pad. And I want to drag this layer all the way at the bottom. And there we go. I'm going to select the cat. I'm going to select the eye layers, which I didn't name, but you already know how to do that. I'm going to hit Control G, which means I group those. And now I can select the entire group. You see? And Control T and make it smaller. Enter, number pad, zoom back in to the proper size. And I can actually take this cat and put him behind one of these things over here. So I'm going to go ahead and lasso select this part right here. Actually, let's do this part right here. So I don't have to lasso that. I'm going to go ahead and rectangle marquee this part right here. Make sure I'm on that right layer. I hit Control J. Now I have a separate layer here. I want to put the cat group in between those two. So now I have the cat group in between those two, as you can see that. I hit Control T, make it smaller, extra small. Now the smaller this gets, that effect gets crazy. It looks like a ball there. So really what I want to do is I want to adjust that effect. So the effect doesn't necessarily scale. So now we have the cat behind the building. That's a huge, huge cat. Okay? So you guys take it from there. And we're going to keep moving on. Now you guys really have a really good understanding of the select tool. We went over the quick masking tool. You know, we went over the unmasking, deselecting. Next time we'll probably go over the pen tool, because that's also a selection tool. And that tool is here. That's where we can actually start making these lines and stuff. That can be used as a selection tool, but that's gonna get into another menu that I really don't want to necessary to get into right now. Okay, so we'll get into the pen tool next time, and we'll get into actually protecting those edges and stuff. So I hope you guys enjoyed that tutorial, and if you have any questions, go ahead and email me. You can email me on YouTube, or you can go ahead and send a response. Alright, you guys. Thank you. Have fun. Bye.